You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. As the curtains were to fall on the year 2024, the Parliament is also keen to close their ending, which has been a whirlwind of scandals and so many questions surrounding key issues like the question of accountability regarding the mismanagement of the public purse, but also the leadership of Parliament is under great strain. In the year ending, we've witnessed a range of sanctions targeting the Speaker of Parliament regarding questions of human rights and accountability, and so many other outstanding issues. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we discuss and review the performance of Parliament in the year ending by appraising all this and much more. I am now joined by a panel of very distinguished personalities whom I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you, our esteemed guests. Let me introduce them in no particular order, starting from Mr. Timothy Chemunges, the Associate Director for the Center for Policy Analysis and the Parliament Watch. Dogu, you're most welcome. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Good to be here. Good morning to our viewers. Glad to really contribute to the discussion. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Next to Timothy is Dr. Charles Atia Tolit, the Associate Director for the Center for Constitutional Governance. You're most welcome, Doctor. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Good morning. And we hope that this is going to be a beautiful encounter.
Many thanks indeed. Thank you for joining us, Doctor. Next to Doctor is the Honorable Leondra Komakech, a former legislator. You're most welcome to the program, Honorable.
Thank you, moderator, and good morning, everybody watching us. I think this is a space I enjoy to share ideas, not to argue, but to just discuss. Yeah.
Many thanks indeed. And last but not least is the gentleman, Mr. Apollo Tusime, a representative of our public watchdog, which is the Uganda Public Press Parliamentary Press Association. You're most welcome to the program, Apollo. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, our viewers. I'm always pleased to be part of the show, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Apollo. Timothy, I'm going to ask you to kickstart us off with a contextual overview of what has been the major highlights of the Parliament's performance for the year ending 2024.
Thank you so much, Isaac. And it's a privilege really and an honor for us to dissect this specific topic on two important fronts: the role that Parliament plays, but also giving them really a report card for their improvement. The assessment of Parliament, I would choose to look at it from two perspectives. I think the constitutional mandate for which they hold, of being able to make laws, represent the citizens, pass the budget, but also share the budget for the different players in the country, and lastly the oversight role. So those are the constitutional mandate for which we should be able to put a torch to them. But more importantly, also look at Parliament as a cornerstone of our democracy and our rule of law, for which they play both within the mandate they enjoy, but also within the power and the other additional privilege that they hold within our dispensation. And so Parliament in this specific year, I think they've had a fair share of challenges that they faced, but also there are quite a number of errors that, in my view, they've been able to make, but also quite a number of achievements they've been able to realize. But also I should emphasize that this specific Parliament, the 11th Parliament, is in its 4th session. And what that means is that they are remaining with one session to end their term. And usually a session is like a year, like a calendar year. And so they've had since 2021 around May, and now they're in their fourth session. So meaning they're winding up. We'll be heading for the fifth session, which usually is characterized by preparations for the next elections, and most of the members of parliament are in the phase where they are preparing for the next elections. And so for this specific, up to now, parliament has been able to consider up to 70 bills that have been considered from the time they started in terms of the numbers. But specifically looking at it from this year, there are quite a number of highlights that have characterized the year, others both good, others not so interesting. But on the forefront, I think that Parliament has been able to Parliament has find itself at the corner of accountability and transparency, where we saw citizens coming very strongly to demand for accountability, to put out the information around Parliament. And you could see all through both the use of digital platforms and seeing young people coming on the streets to demand for better. Unfortunately, I think the questions were more than the answers that were being provided, and you could see the response from Parliament not very fulfilling. And sometimes you could see the speaker saying that there are things that cannot be litigated in the public space. And so I think that they are quite, and that really put Parliament in a space that while Parliament should be at the cornerstone of pushing and championing accountability, its internal mechanism or its ability to internally champion accountability or even exude confidence to the citizens that we can be accountable before we hold the rest of the citizenry accountable was put to question. This year also has been characterized by the RAPEX, the rationalization process, where we saw government come very strongly in reducing some of the agencies that were deemed that they were taken back to their mother ministries. Of course, government was very keen in making a case on how much would be saved as a result of this initiative. Key of those, of course, the citizens must have noticed the coffee, the concerns that the coffee bill brought, but also how Parliament decided to go about it. I think the citizens were very clear in light of what they thought, but I think government was very deliberate and very specific in light of what they wanted. I think that also the opposition was the other angle, was yet also brought at the forefront. Because the opposition is the government in waiting, both in Parliament and out of Parliament. And that under the leading opposition party today is the National Unity Party. And in Parliament we had the Honorable Matthias Mpuga was at the forefront of leading the rest of the opposition parties in Parliament. And so the question, the ability of the opposition to champion matters to do with corruption, matters to do with transparency, also came on the spotlight, where we saw some of the opposition leaders being implicated and being accused of having participated in these corruption scandals. And so I think the biggest debate and trying to understand what role can we be to ensure that the opposition can check the government, but also provide very brilliant ideas to enhance Parliament's role, but also to contribute on the legislative processes. There are other components around the human rights that still remain very elusive in terms of the legislative front, but also in terms of being able to hold the executive accountable to provide clear accountability on matters to do with human rights. because it still remains to be very dicey. We still have a lot of unresolved issues on corruption, on human rights abuses from the previous elections that are still pending. But Parliament still holds a very critical role in ensuring that the observance, the adherence of human rights is respected. The other angle really is in terms of corruption, and Parliament receives reports from the annual report on the state of corruption, and how they've been able to process, push for recovery of some of this money, but also more importantly, enforcement. Of course, there are complementary roles that support the IG. You have the Auditor General who audits, how the resources are used. You also have in Parliament the accountability committees, which should be able to give spotlight and look further in how the resources are utilized. And so I think that to that end, looking at how some of the facts this year we've received and those that came out in light of how Parliament utilizes its own resources, I think it came out very clearly that if Parliament itself cannot provide a clear accountability of its resources as it uses, its ability to check the rest is greatly compromised. So I think that was also another area, and it's still very elusive in terms of matters to do with corruption, because Parliament is at the cornerstone of ensuring that some of these things are prevented, or we manage them at that level. And you could see recently when the Speaker was responding to the request that was put to the Clerk of Parliament to provide the salary structure of members of Parliament and those of the staff, and the response to that to that effect, that we have to create a very clear line that Parliament's resources, how staff are paid, how members are Parliament, shouldn't be a business of Equal Opportunities Commission. And so I think that the assessment if as a teacher's assessment, I think I would give Parliament really, for this year's performance, maybe a 38%. Looking at it from the perspective of its mandate, but also the role it has contributed to contributing to the democracy, but also the rule of law. We still have a lot of pending corruption, but also very unclear usage of resources going to ROCO, which still very remains. And yet Parliament is at the center of ensuring that these resources should be utilized clearly. The demanding for accountability should be at the top, among the top priorities of Parliament. We've seen the opposition going to the site of some of these places, ROCO, and they are being denied. Atiak is also another very elusive project that we've continued to put resources, and nothing seems to come out from there. All this, again, while the executive is responsible, Parliament exercises the mandate of oversight to ensure that the resources that are being put there are utilized well and there is value for money, and that there is no need to continue pumping resources to places that are not, that there is no accountability, but also there is no value. But we've seen what we've seen. You've seen Parliament, continuing to allocate resources. Lastly, I think that is on Parliament's role around the public debt, because I think that one of our biggest problems that we face in this country is the question of debt. We spend, or we use close to around up to around 46% of our budget to pay debt. And that compromises the available resources for us to put into development. Parliament is at the core and at the center of ensuring that we manage our debt and don't continue to borrow. And even what we borrow should be utilized well. To that end, we've not seen Parliament come very strong in ensuring that we protect and create this gap. As we stand now, our debt actually is around 96 trillion, which is a huge huge amount of money. And when you go to assess very clearly, you'll see that some of these resources are not clearly used. There are those, there are loans that were picked and have not been utilized. There are those that are very unclear, and how we continue to borrow, how we continue to furnish some of the allocations within government, including State House, remains very unclear. So at the end of the day, Parliament, if you have a rogue Parliament, the likelihood of having a streamlined structure of governance in the country is greatly compromised. But if you have a sober Parliament, it will be able to shape how government operates, because Parliament holds both it has the actual, but also there are those powers that it has been granted by the Constitution. But what we've seen recently is, the executive has continued to override Parliament, and in many times it's to the extent of the wishes of the executive. You could see that with how budget was considered, how the budget for this financial year was considered. Parliament enjoys the autonomy around making appropriation, ensuring that it appropriates to the extent it understands, or how it views the interests of its people, or the people of Uganda. Parliament passed the budget, and when it went to the president was like, no, there is a problem here. You can't continue frustrating the project of government. So to that end, you see that the question of checks and balances are not there anymore. I think that the executive are having a right, and that whatever they want, they will have it through Parliament. And so Parliament has, over time, presented itself to be at the mercy of the executive. And that greatly compromises the protection of democracy, the strengthening of democracy, but also the question of the rule of law in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Apollo,
Yes,
as a journalist, we cannot overemphasize your role on behalf of the public to demand accountability, political accountability from an institution like Parliament. What are your impressions of the Parliament's performance for the year ending 2024?
Yeah, thank you so much, our host and our viewers. I want to agree with Timothy that the 11th Parliament during this year ending the 4th session, they have had their share of challenges and achievements. But it is not easy to rate the performance of Parliament, especially at this time when we only have 1 year to elections. I can authoritatively state that even as we speak, committees are not sitting because of lack of quorum. Members are busy vote hunting in their constituencies. And you wonder what will happen in the next year, the last year of this 11th Parliament, when everybody maybe will be preoccupied with the next election. So it is not so easy. Whereas Timothy laid out the cardinal roles of the legislature, but I also think that there is something else that we should also consider, that this Parliament has suffered, its image has suffered, and while at the beginning of this term of Parliament, they were telling us it should be a people-centered Parliament and blah blah. It looks like now every day that passes by, Parliament goes away and away from the people. Members of the public accessing Parliament has increasingly become difficult, and I don't know if that makes it in any way better in performance if the people they legislate on behalf of cannot even be allowed to participate and be part of the legislative process, because it's their right. They have to come and possibly sit in the gallery and watch over the proceedings. But like Timothy said, issues of credibility have dented the image of Parliament. We have seen in this year members of Parliament who have been arraigned in court for their alleged involvement in acts of corruption. Not one, not two, but several legislators. We have, like he said, we have seen the administrators, the leadership of Parliament, being cagey about information, which should be actually public information, about the emoluments and privileges of members of Parliament or staff of Parliament, which everyone would think would be a public information. Why don't you, if any entity says or requires you to provide information, such information, why don't you provide it? And like I said, it is public. It should be public information. But all that brings out the question of accountability. The legislators or the legislature, which should be at the forefront of promoting accountability, they are the ones who actually fear and run away from accountability, which I think also dents their credibility, and in terms of performance brings down their scores in performance. I also want to speak about the individual members of Parliament. You also at one point sympathize with them because we witnessed a scenario, for instance, like the coffee debate, where the executive was directly had a direct interest in the deliberations of Parliament. They badly wanted to determine the position of of Uganda Coffee Development Authority, and finally the executive or the president took the day, and UCDA was taken back. And that again shows you how vulnerable. While the administrators of Parliament say that they are an independent institution of government, when we speak about their salaries or what, and they say for us we are self-accounting body, we are independent. But again, the same entity, when it comes to passing a sensitive or a controversial matter, then they donate or give away their independence willingly. So it also dents it also undermines their position on performance of this Parliament, and it has been happening. It has been gradually happening, and it is not getting any better. The independence of Parliament is getting eroded every day, and like Timothy said, we will eventually get to a point where the executive will pass anything, will have anything through that Parliament, which tells you how the level of performance has gone down. They no longer have the spine to stand and say and tell the executive, much as we have to work together, this is our position, and we stand by our position. So that's another critical issue we can look at as we evaluate the performance of Parliament. Its independence is not anywhere. They are giving away their independence every day. Finally, I can maybe emphasize that as the election year approaches, we have also seen members of Parliament debating on emotions. Again, if I refer you to the coffee debate, you could see members of Parliament trying to impress their voters. Some of them trying to impress their voters, hoping, maybe thinking that the coffee issue may be a campaign tool in one way or another, and that, I think, also affects their performance, because you would think that the leaders should stand on a position where they think their voters will benefit and will get the laws that can develop the nation and move forward. But when members of Parliament start debating on emotions, and that is very, very, very dangerous. I think we can expect many more of these things to come, because, like I said, if we today do not have committees sitting, just because members of Parliament are looking for votes, they are out there, and there is another year coming. You can imagine what will happen in the next year. But on the flip side, I also think, Mr. Moderator, that maybe that is also good. It is better, to me, it is better the MPs stay out of Parliament than being in Parliament with their minds and hearts outside there in their constituencies. I think that is how we have had laws that have been challenged, or bills passed and later challenged, because MPs are in the House, sitting in the House, and they are sitting, I mean, they are thinking about maybe the debts, the lenders, the money lenders owe them. They are thinking about the next election, whether they will come back or will be voted out. So on another hand, I think let them stay in their constituencies instead of sitting in Parliament and passing laws anyhow. That's another side I wanted to bring to you. But all in all, our Parliament, hopefully, next time, come 2026, let's hope we'll get good, credible leaders who would sit in that House and legislate on behalf of the people, other than these majority of legislators that we have in Parliament, who are there to negotiate deals and on their behalf and legislating on their own interest instead of the interest of their voters and the population.
Thanks, Apollo. Honorable, leveraging your past experience as a legislator, what verdict would you render with respect to the performance of Parliament in the year ending 2024?
Oh my God. Well, I don't know. Listening to this, the submission by the two colleagues who actually technically monitor what Parliament does as a job, year in, year out, and they are not political, they are technical, they observe on a daily basis what goes on. I think if they were class teachers, today would received received the worst news of all students have failed.
For retake.
and they all must go for a take. And so there's nothing like progress. We sat here listening, and we thought possibly there could be something a little better, you know. But even the 38% that he raised, I think he was extremely conservative with it. If it is to be really tight marking, I see like we may end up with 10% of real performance in the context of their submission. You know? So I'm so discouraged for this country, because if the legislature, which is one of the arms of government, is performing at below 38%, then government is performing at what percent? How about the judiciary? You know, you have seen we are all busy. If the three arms are so busy, government has challenges. Judiciary is on the issues of BCG, on the issue just certificate to practice. So there's so many things going on. Now, concentrating on Parliament, I think from in the last Parliament, we came with a lot of inspiration of past members of Parliament. You hear people like Okule Park, Honorable Okule Park, Ben Wacha. You hear a person like Norbert Mao, Agri Awori. You know, when they stand to debate, you know this is not going to be easy. So government was on its toes every time to make sure its technical bench was really working. You know, because these members of Parliament even moved a motion to request for equipping of the library of Parliament in the 6th Parliament. You know, 1996. Yeah. The library, so the then clerk, Tandikwire, had to do a project with the Americans, USAID, to say how do we equip Parliament to facilitate members to avoid the individual searching for information, for everything, so that everything is there, digital and hard. So that's when the USAID gave the first batch of its biggest consignment to Parliament was to equip that library. And that library was not equipped for decoration. That is when even for the first time members of Parliament were facilitated to open email addresses. You know, Yahoo.
Jemawes should check how many go to the library.
Yes, you know, so you can have indicators that that library is only being used by foreigners. You know, I walked in there, in that library. We used to sit one of us only throughout.
That's true.
You know, we checked. I checked with the director. I said, the director, where are people in the library?
You had no deals. You had no deals.
Yeah. The director said, well, we have tried our best. This is the most equipped library with over 1,000 online journals. If you want to go to Harvard University and check the law section, it is there in Parliament. If you want to go to Cambridge, Oxford, anywhere.
Are you saying these members of Parliament who have equivalent can actually study Harvard?
Now for me, that is...
It's really equipped. Really equipped.
I don't know. So we have a problem to solve here. You know, resources from foreign governments went in. I remember at that time it was so difficult to even request members to give in their email addresses. You know, people were there. So I remember I came from Norway. I had a Gmail account. I think I was the first Ugandan with a Gmail account. Because I also got it through recommendation of some Norwegians, because they said Gmail is not in Africa. So we don't know whether if you go to Uganda, you'll have this thing. But I said, let me keep it. I gave it 2 emails, Blue Mail and Gmail. Now, in Parliament, there was Yahoo. Everybody opened Yahoo. And by then, the gentleman called Simon Tebango, you know, from UK with the computer science, he came to Uganda, he could not do anything. He started importing vehicles. So that's why he got his job, to do computer work and IT in Parliament. You know, he opened email for all the MPs. And it ended there. I think it is only Mao who kept his parliamentary email up to today. It is mpmao@yahoo.com. You know? The rest, it was open, they forgot even the password. So looking from that trend, that the institution has been given its technical capacity to deliver for Ugandans. We have a very competent institutional framework in that parliament of Uganda. If you rated it with many of parliaments in Africa, it is highly rated in terms of what is ready for members to utilize. You know, we are on Facebook Live, we are on Twitter, we are on everything else. But many members do not know that we debate live on Twitter, we debate live on Facebook. You know, even when these strangers enter parliament, I don't know whether they're aware that this thing is being screened, the whole world. So my biggest worry, not disappointment, because I'm just now worried. Because if you are disappointed, that means there's room for improvement. My biggest worry is, why is it that the parliament, the first parliament of 1962 was very strong? We need a study.
Yeah.
We need a study. A scientific study with its methodology to do a critical analysis of performance of parliament since independence. And then we get a finding that can help the coming parliaments and even government to improve on legislative scrutiny. Because members of the public voted, those who came in 1962, they were predominant teachers. Predominant teachers. From the villages.
Primary school teachers.
Yeah, primary school teachers. But if you look at their
Today
level,
they are businessmen,
yes.
majority.
But we're wondering, why is it that even businessmen should be very competent?
Yeah.
You know, with the IT, even AI is there. Eh? Even with closed eyes, you can tell AI that you can at least tell me a lie about this.
Yeah.
AI will try to give you 10% of what you can get. Now, all this is not being done. So where is the problem? Do we have real members of parliament, or we have shadows? Because I remember when we entered the 10th parliament, the deputy speaker told me,
In IT, they call them deep fake.
deep fake. So I remember the Jacob Olanya, who was our colleague, and really, you know, we campaigned for him in Gulu, and Charles knows that. We could see that he would be a very good debater in parliament, because that was his passion. We struggled. He came to parliament. He just told us one thing: you will see what I'll do there. You will see. Now, he came with the interest of being a real member of parliament. And in one term, when he went back, he was thrown out. But he said, I will go back. After Juba peace issues process, he came back. Now, in Jacob, you could see, it would feel so bad if you are debating and you are not on issues.
Yeah.
Jacob would actually tell you to sit down, regardless of the side where you come from. Whether government side, whether you're opposition.
He actually made it clear
Yeah,
when he was elected speaker
yeah.
that debate in parliament will only be research based.
Yeah. And that was his vision. When he became now the speaker, he said, this time you will see what will happen in parliament. I am going to block off members of parliament who go for the sake of going. And I will recommend to the president, if they belong to NRM, they should never come back to parliament. If they're from opposition, they should stop pretending. Now these were things he wanted to do, but he never. I wish parliament can play Jacob's vision for the 10th parliament. It would help even beyond, I mean, for the 11th parliament, it would help even the 12th parliament and even future parliament, because he wanted to give a mark. And for me, I'm happy that we have Right Honorable Taiba, who is my good friend from the university. We worked together on Uganda Young Democrats. We started our politics there. Right Honorable Anita Mong. They have the best opportunity to excel with distinctions, because everything has been set that this is the vision of the 10th parliament. If it is not research based, then there's nothing else. We are not going to entertain. We are going to give people who would want to speak on particular things should apply 2 months in advance. So that you are given 30 minutes or 1 hour. I remember Jacob debating the sale of UCB. For those who watched that debate with the Okuli Parks and the Agri Awards, he spoke for 1 hour. And he convinced the whole parliament that UCB should not be what? Sold. And that is how Suruma, who was then the chair and the MD, I think,
Yes.
accepted that of the entire debate in parliament, he has decided to shift his position from the president's position, that UCB should not be sold.
Yeah.
Jacob brought the audit reports of UCB and how it was making money, the profit, and asked, so what is the problem? Nobody could answer. You know? And that's when they marked him and said, this guy is very dangerous. The way he was speaking with statistics, with the figures, with everything, with the law. The good thing, he is an agricultural economist. He did the law. So he was combining all this at play. I think we need to review or even study the current members of parliament in terms of their level of competency.
Thank you, Honorable.
Right? It looks like there is something wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they went to school or the school went through them.
I'm going to ask you to hold on to your point. I'll return back to you.
Add information
Yeah,
for
true.
Honorable before.
Okay, just in a minute.
So the information that I have, Honorable, is to the extent of the quality in terms of education of the members of parliament we have. And it could reinforce maybe the position that you have, that of the 529 members of parliament elected, you have at least 33% having a master's degree.
Yes, I think I saw that.
So
We
where
have-
is it?
so that's 33%.
Which university?
We have at least 3%, the colleagues of doctor, at least they have PhDs, 3.3%. We have 34%, and we did this study, 34% have a minimum of a bachelor's degree.
It is 60.
Up to 93%, at least the minimum they have is, it's only 6% that have a diploma, senior 6 and below.
So this is an inverse relations. The higher
the
you go
question-
with education,
So
the lower the output.
Possibly there are other factors. There are other factors maybe.
Orientation. I don't know. I did not give an orientation well to begin as new members. So anyway, it needs a study. You can now see the problem.
Let me bring in Doctor. Doctor, I am going to ask you to assume the position of a citizen. That is the tangent I want you to follow. From a citizen's standpoint, are you satisfied with the performance of the 11th Parliament for the year ending 2024?
Oh, sure, thanks. Yes, speaking as a citizen, I will certainly say no, and a resounding no. And I'll try to give context to it. I think what we need to do, Kwagala, maybe something we also are getting wrong, is, do we actually know what parliament is? To start with.
Yeah.
And I'll just attempt a very brief history of parliament. And in a very simple, I think the story is that the first parliament was what they called a direct parliament, which sat in Greece, in Athens, in the stadium of Olympia, where after stages of civilization, I think it was after the conversation between Aristotle, the philosopher, and Socrates on the question of representation. Who speaks for who? You know, the question of agency. Do I need somebody to speak for me, or I speak for myself? It's a bulk of literature in philosophy. It's called the treatise. You know, that conversation. So they came to a conclusion that after the meeting at Olympus, they saw the amount of people who came. Literally everybody left what they were doing, and they were at that stadium to discuss their issues. And the issue at question was, how do we get governed from here going forward? Because the first revolution had just happened, I think slightly before 200 AD, I mean BC. Because then what we called the priests were also the rulers. So once they overthrew them, the question was, going forward, how do we get governed? And I think that is how the conversation of good governance and democracy comes into play. So the question you're asking me is that, as a citizen, do I have a say on how I get governed? I think I do. We don't seem to be getting the results of what we are getting, I think, because we have mixed up too many things. I'll start with our responsibility as citizens. Because we have responsibility as citizens. Because governance has two sides. It has the supply side and it has the demand side. So, whereas we ask for supply, especially for social goods, including education, health, roads, security, and all these things. And they are even categorized. They are what they call public goods, and they are what they call goods that are private. But we also have a duty as citizens. One of the cardinal duties of us as citizens is that there is a methodology that the world has seemed to agree upon, that is the method of electing those who then pretend over what we do. And one of them, there are many in the world, but at least the one we are practicing is the Westminster system, which is the parliamentary system. How do we get to this contract? We get to this contract at the stage of elections, when people come, present themselves, and say, I would like to be your leader, and take me there. And in turn, when we accept what they have sold to us, the program they have sold, we vote them. For me, I think the problem starts at that point. And I'll expand it a bit. We say we are under a multi-party dispensation. But what we see as citizens every day, I know I may know slightly more than the ordinary man outside there. But I think we have up to registered parties, let alone those which are active. These are registered, both active and non-active. I think they are over 70-something. The ones which are active are the ones we know about, the NRM, the FDC, the DP, NUP, and all this. There is something wrong happening in these parties. At least from my experience today, I'm at the turn of 50, and I think now I'm a fairly mature adult who has seen trends. And I've lived out there and also seen. One thing that I find very unusual in our politics is how our members, or particularly how our politicians, are groomed. First of all, there is something wrong with the way the government is running things, especially when a party which is registered, there's the Political Organizations Act. It allows many things. It also restricts many things. But one of the things that it allows is that these people should be able to mobilize. They should be able to be going to citizens. So one of the questions we are struggling with here, like our good friend from the media was raising, that MPs, there is absenteeism in parliament, which we know. Even the Speaker of Parliament has come many times to say there is absenteeism. People are craving to be out in the constituencies. But why? Why that need? Because if you are part of the community, you've been groomed there, you had a sunset point on which you stood and you've come to Parliament. By the way, I also know legally that a member of Parliament is not a delegate. He has no obligation actually to go and consult. Eh?
You must know the issues.
When Parliament goes to consult, it is actually designate. Parliament actually goes into recess for members of Parliament to go to consult. So a clever member of Parliament, like the Honorable Lendo Komakech was saying, would stay here in Parliament in Kampala, have access to internet, have access to the library, and understand the dynamics, the attitude of government. Because you see, these are three different things. Parliament is not government, it is Parliament. Government is the executive, is the state. Then we have the judiciary, which is like a tripartite, a holy matrimony of three. Whereas they can cooperate to deliver goods and services. There is no obligation whatsoever that they should agree all the time.
No.
Now, our problem starts from the way we elect these people. Who do we elect? Because you are seated in the village. Some boy went to Kampala, made a little fortune. He left with a Kavera. He now comes back with a briefcase or some rolling bag. He's speaking some little English around and begins to say, I came back. They called me. They want to come and consult. Who called you? Eh? So you find that there is no grooming. Eh? There is no grooming in these political parties. I have seen democracies where they call it winning a candidature. Honorable Leandro here is my representative. He comes from Gulu, where I come. I know the baptism of fire that this man went through to get the candidature for DP. Eh? There are few parties that are working to get a candidate, because at the time he came, they were coming in the footsteps of the Honorable Minister Mao. And there were about 3 of them who, right from our university days with him, have been groomed in that party. They were all eligible. It took this man, my friend, the sun and the moon, to get that candidate. That is where you begin to see that I think there is a resemblance of representation here, because then the party should also work as a sieve to protect the general public, from rogues.
The deep fakes.
The deep fakes. But you see, this is not working. Why? We have been heralded into this animal called the movement, or the NRM. By the way, I do not know whether, you see, Ugandans have the shortest memory. They forget quickly. People actually forget that this movement thing was outlawed in the courts. When we were moving back to multipartyism, which bill the movement sponsored, we went into a referenda. This movement, this creature, I see people writing movement. It is in legal books.
Yeah, it is in the Constitution.
But this thing is outlawed. We have nothing like a movement system.
As you sum up.
Yes, so the 3 points I'm trying to make is from the origin. We have deep fakes right from how they enter these parties. And to tell you that it is unorthodox, for me, Uganda is the first country where I have seen where the president moves to a constituency to campaign for a candidate. Eh?
Yeah.
In proper democracy,
It doesn't.
where you are grounded as a member, as a son of the constituency, it is you who should be mobilizing for the president. Because what are you adding to the party? So when I see Museveni's ministers, I keep asking, how does he arrive at the judgment to appoint them ministers? What are they bringing? Because first of all, he came and campaigned for you. Then you've come to a house. And then we have a house that is dangerously legally skewed. Why am I saying this? There is not much. You ask me whether we are satisfied. Because in satisfaction, it's not only quantity. Eh? There should also be quality. In fact, I really don't agree with this methodology I have seen with my good friend Timothy here. This thing of saying how many bills have you passed. I would rather you pass 3 bills, but which are potent, other than passing 30 bills, 60 bills, which have no masasi.
For public relations.
I'm not interested in that. So, we need quality. We're not getting that quality. 2, most of our members of parliament sit on the fence. We missed a big opportunity in the, RIP Onapito. And these are admirable leaders. Onapito was my HP. When I was in Senior 1, Onapito was in Senior 6 in St. Peter's College. And I had the privilege to know them as seniors. These are polished people. We missed an opportunity in the bill sponsored by Onapito and the Honorable Mugisha Muntu, which wanted to separate the legislature and the executive. Because if you don't have that, then Museveni enjoys putting people on the parking lot. Let me tell you, if you want to con money from an MP, just call him now. Tell him, hey, you man, Gundi, I saw your name on the list. Which list?
The cabinet list.
That there is going to be the shaft. I'm telling you, the guy can come on foot from Kampala to Jinja. So, for we the citizens, we need to learn 3 important things. Parliament is an important thing because it is the only arm, that is where we have lent our agency. These are the people who are negotiating for us in that public space. And what is in that? You see, that space we're talking about is also defined. It's like a football game. There are rules. In football, there must be a round ball that people kick and enter a certain place. The football of democracy is about social goals. Have you delivered hospitals? Have you delivered freedoms? Because one of the biggest things, by the way, any government is inherently a dictatorship. And that is deep philosophy, which I can substantiate. So, a member of parliament should ensure that the executive is held back. The tendencies of dictatorship are held back. That's what we call civic space. So, freedoms of press are almost gone. Freedoms of civic expression and the agency are all. The Constitution says another thing. Here, when you demonstrate,
In jail.
the police say they have arrested you. How do you arrest me? You see, the law is simple. You get me, you say I've done wrong, you should charge me. Charge me against something. Now, you say I'm demonstrating. The Constitution says demonstrate.
Doctor, thank you so much for your perspective.
One thing.
At this,
One thing I remind Doctor about what he said before I forget. He says the root cause, the genesis of the problems is with the voters. If I heard you well,
Yes, absolutely.
who are voting wrong people into positions of responsibility. But I also wish to remind him that there is a reason as to why people are actually voting these people. And I want to disagree with you that there are no credible people or capable people who can sit in parliament. There are very
Are you
many.
saying I'm not credible?
Yeah, I'm saying there are very many.
I don't have a village? No.
No,
You withdraw.
what I'm saying, I
understand what
don't
you're saying.
agree with him when he said that, that these people are just voting wrong people. I want to remind him that there are even credible and capable people in our society, in our communities, who can be in that parliament. But because of other factors, for instance, like commercialized politics of today, you talked about RIP, Onapito Ekoromoit, and Honorable here talked about others. They are even Honorable here. They were very capable members of parliament in that house. But because of other factors now that are playing out, these people do not have a chance now to go to parliament.
And I think that is what we should fight.
Honorable, I'm going to come to you. Let me first invite Chemonge is here. Timothy, considering the metric of the output of the bills by the parliament, Doctor seems to contend that we shouldn't focus so much on the quantity, but rather we should have our focus on the quality, because then it is the bills that regulate the way of life of society. So, considering the output of the bills by the parliament for the year ending 2024, what could be your assessment?
No, I absolutely agree with what Doctor says. But of course, that shouldn't, we shouldn't close our eyes on the other side. What the citizens want are the services. They want to see health care improved. They want to see their education questions addressed. We want to see the question of peace in this country, but also the cohesion, security, and many other things really that the citizens will want to see. But also, I think that the legislature, in how it operates, the context informs the output. And again, looking right from how the election period starts, how the leaders get into place, how the political parties are structured, and this has clearly been highlighted by Charles, which I absolutely agree, that without clear frameworks in which political parties operate, the nurturing and the role that the political parties should play to ensure that we have leaders that can meaningfully contribute in this space. Without that, the kind of leaders that we are likely to receive may be greatly compromised. And I strongly apply the same ideology even in the presidency. That for presidency, you need leadership that is a bit more structured, so that there are accountability mechanisms, but also structures that can support this. Otherwise, you will be everywhere. But nonetheless, I think that looking at how Parliament operates and in our current context, which is largely survival, I interact with members of Parliament on a daily, and that sometimes the yardstick for the time for coming up on a decision is what is the big man saying? Is it likely to rub him the wrong way as a yardstick? And the same is even with the leadership of Parliament. What is the Speaker thinking? What is she? What's her view on the same? Partly because of the structure and where we find ourselves, that you don't want to rub the Speaker the wrong way because of the benefits that come along with being in good relations with the Speaker. That many of these things are likely to be withdrawn. So what that does is that it compromises the ability to have sober decision making, but also having a group of individuals that can give a proper direction of Parliament. Of course, the other thing is that the leadership of the country, the leadership of institutions, sometimes they are as good as the kind of leaders that we have in charge of some of these institutions. And that the likelihood of having a very brilliant leader and a poor institution sometimes is not likely to be there. The reflection of the institution is a reflection of the kind of leader that we have at the helm. And that's looking at, say, Parliament specifically, and the leadership that we've had, that we have currently in Parliament, and under the leadership of Right Honourable Anita Among. I think that there are quite a number of shortfalls, and that there is quite a number of things that we desire for better if we had a very clear direction of how Parliament should go, if certain things to do with how, because you'll notice that there are things, actually almost 70% in Parliament, in terms of decision making, they don't have a direct implication of how the president thinks, and that has been my assessment. I think it is the continuous fear of what the kind of decision they are going to make will look like will be looked at by the president. You'll find that even in Parliament, while there are many times when there are bills, there are laws that are likely to create contention or they are going to be controversial, almost 90% of the laws that are considered on the floor of Parliament they are subject to arguments, debates, but also exchanges between the members of Parliament. There are few, like let's say the coffee bill, that gets into the extreme, where it's us against them. But there are those that just require objective discussion and debate on the floor of Parliament. But many times we don't get that opportunity. And so I think that to that end, you find that it brings now the quality of members of Parliament that we have, but also the kind of leadership we do have currently. Unfortunately, I think that also Parliament itself, to be fair to them, they've had to pay the price of the been a misunderstanding by the public of their role. Of course, it is them that continue to perpetuate some of this confusion during the elections, trying to promise what is not within their scope. But again, it's also informed by the kind of competition that we have.
They are fake briefcase.
Yeah, absolutely. So you find them promising the electorate are expecting a road, but it is not your role to construct a road. You know, we are going to bring electricity here, and the electorate would wait for the electricity. Today you go to the constituency, the electorate are expecting water. Actually, you are talking, they are doing for you like this. You think that they are happy, but they are telling you, they are communicating that, boss, we are thirsty. You see, it's time for recess. Members of Parliament can hardly go back to the constituency, because every step is money. The amount of money that you have to spend as a member of Parliament. Sometimes you have to run away from your people because of the spending, because of the expectations that people have. You have members of Parliament have to pay fees, they have to pay funeral, and many of these things that are not within their. But of course, that also is a money.
It's also incompetence.
Yes, it's also
because
incompetence.
you see, members of Parliament actually have the leeway to solve, to liberate. In fact, the Ugandan member of Parliament needs to start a revolution to liberate themselves first from the autocracy. Because honestly, you pass the education policy. Why don't you ensure that the fees burden you are facing back there is admitted within the public coffer? You have to pay funerals. Why do you wait for people to die first? Fix the hospitals, you know. So there is a crisis in Parliament, what they call crisis of civilization. We have both people who should be honorable and should arguably know what to do, but at the same time, they seem to be in a hollow abyss of ignorance. So this is a civilization of crisis.
Yes, so as I conclude, I think that there's a fundamental challenge of leadership, and leadership at all scales. There are realities definitely on ground when you engage the MPs. There are realities that they are grappling with. Some envisaged beyond their control. What Charles highlights should be what actually members of Parliament, they should champion that. But the practicalities you find that we are facing, and the continued tolerance of impunity within our governance structure has led us to where we are at. Where we are lighting earlier the debt burden, for example. You have a huge chunk of our budget going to debt, to repaying debt. You have another chunk going to paying the gratuity, wages, and all these other amounts of money. And then you find that there's very limited, there's small amount, and then you have corruption. Corruption these days, it's so smart that actually it's properly incorporated in the budgets. So the monies are properly budgeted for. So for you to wait for it to be cleared the other side, it will be the monies are clearly allocated, you know, and so there's a big confusion. The amount of money that is available, that can be used discretionary towards development and all these things is quite small. But fundamentally, I think the question of leadership is lacking.
Honorable,
Yes.
let me invite you to discuss the component of accountability vis-a-vis the question of corruption. In this year, Parliament has been plagued with persistent concerns from the public that they are not confident in its ability to demand for accountability from the executive. A case in point, we had the protest action of the public on the digital platforms, on Twitter, and even in the print media. The speaker sidesteps the calls for clarifying what the exact position of the parliament is, and all those have persisted even as we go into the next electoral cycle. How could parliament enhance the mechanism of being more accountable to the public?
Yes, I think, thank you. Accountability is becoming a very big challenge across government. And transparency is becoming a myth. Everybody, if you talk about transparency, people don't like it. So I think accountability, the way, if you look at the rules of procedure of parliament, it is so good. If you read it, you find that it is obvious that you get what you deserve. But for me, I saw when I was in parliament, in the 5 years of the 10th parliament, the challenge I observed was that accountability committees are the prism of opposition, right? Now, when you look at the competency of the leadership of those committees, now you get problems. I remember when I was there, I never served in any of the shadow cabinet because even they say that they don't know me. I could hear they say that, oh, who is that guy? You know, and so I was not entitled to be in any of the shadow cabinet. Then I said, okay, let me do my own things. That is how I became the chair of the Greater North Parliamentary Forum and used it as a platform. I started writing my bills, you know, the legal aid bill, I wrote it myself. The Human Rights Defenders and Protection Bill, I wrote it myself because I had time to do a lot of work. Now, if you see how these accountability committees work and you go inside there, what they call the defects, you find that you are dealing with dry banana leaves. I remember NRM used that thing.
Kisanja.
Kisanja. When was that? That was 1996.
2001.
Yeah, I think
2001.
I could imagine, you know, very serious people putting on banana leaves, dry, ready for fire if you set it. And then I look at my accountability committees. You find at the end of the day, to be a chair of an accountability committee, you must have some basic accounting. At least you should understand how money moves, how finance, how resources are accounted for, what are the frameworks, how do you have, if you have to do an audit, you know, you must have a basic. There's nothing. At the end of the day, you say, okay, we are going to Gulu to go and look at the operation of local governments. Oversight.
They're going to do a research without question.
Yeah. You find people are just relaxing, and even people are just merry-making. The clerks are saying, you write something. You know, the clerks are subjected to artificially generate.
They are counting per diems.
Yes, but the most motivation in all the strips are per diems. I was given, I give you my own example, to go and do an assessment of our mission in Brussels. You know, I was just sitting in the plenary, and they were saying they brought the issue of, from the Committee of Foreign Affairs where I used to sit, that the Brussels mission is totally dilapidated to the extent that since 1975, when Amin bought the land, Amin built 4 stories with a lift, the best in Europe by that time, is gone. The furniture that was bought in 1975 is still the one that was there. So then it became a serious debate, and then the speaker, by that time that was Kadaga on the chair, said, Committee of Foreign Affairs must go. And this time she's going to select those who should go, and the person who should head the delegation. So I was given to head the delegation of that committee. We were 7, and we were told, come with the credible reports and present it on the floor here. Now, we went. It was oversight, but you could also see that when you do something, you account for everything that you have done. A serious report. We were there for 10 days. We wrote reports on everything we found there. The ambassador told us that, I know you are doing a normal annual visit. I'm fed up with receiving MPs who come here and say that we have come to check on the state of the embassy. We are going to report back. After that, they just fly back. But they shop the whole of Brussels and then they fly back. So I felt it in myself. And I said, how much can I be accountable as a chair of the delegation to Parliament? So that is when I wrote a technical report, having observed as a methodology and having shared a lot of insight from all staff. I met them one by one, closed doors, come and tell me everything. They submitted deputy ambassador, the third secretary, everybody, up to the driver. They told us and wrote the report. So when I presented the report, I requested this, Madam Speaker, let's have a debate on this report I'm going to present and give me enough time. This thing of saying, sit down, what, I will not accept. So we did that as a sample. And it was amazing that it caught fire. It has helped many missions on the methodology we used because we were very technical. It was not just this whitewashing. At the end, we prayed because we even did a technical analysis of how much it would cost, plus bills of quantities. We did all, you know. It came to 10 billion. That was the amount that would take back the building to its former glory. 10 billion. Parliament accepted. Parliament moved. The resolution of Parliament was that this money must be reappropriated from any other budget and given to Minister of Finance. Can you imagine in 2 months that money was sent to Brussels? 10 billion. And if you go to Brussels now, you go and check our embassy. That is where the party to celebrate the Zimbabwe's independence was held in 1975. You know, it sits in the middle of Brussels. It is one of the most expensive space you can ever get. Yes. These days you cannot get. You know, so that money helped to rebuild that place, new lifts, new everything. The ambassador's residence completely brought to new. The executive wing for guests, if they are there, you know, everything is new in Brussels and is the best destination any member of all citizens of Uganda can go to now. So for me, when you look at accountability in Parliament, it is not accountability. It is equalability. In Acholi, I would call that. Yes. Kwal means stealing. They go through equalability, not accountability. Because here, it is where figures are cooked to produce different results, even on what has not been done. I've seen auditors report. Now, that is where our biggest problem is. You cannot say the 10th Parliament the 11th Parliament is going to be the one in charge of looking at the 10th Parliament's auditor's report. It should go concurrently. I've been amazed that there are other accountabilities in Parliament that are brought 3 years. 3 years. And you know, you will be having a new Parliament sitting, and these are all auditors' reports that even are just done as rituals. The way I was seeing the body language, it is a ritual. Let us just finish this. There's nothing. This thing is already passed. This is 3 years ago. Now that is where it is. So unless actually we should even think deeply on revising the laws on accountability, especially in Parliament. How do you account for resources used and not used? It should affect the Auditor General's office. The conventional way of approaching auditing in Uganda does not work with the current legacy of corruption. We need to have a totally new framework of engaging in auditing, especially on public finance. Because the assumption is that the person who spent the money is very honest. And that is what the law presumes.
The self-accounting principle of Parliament.
It doesn't work. They front load you with the money. Then you just sit and say, how will I eat this money? Then you now have the best framework of how money should be eaten. You know?
Yeah.
We have run projects. If you see how you account for money that you have spent on projects and how people have lost jobs, and here is the public space. So I think the honors go back to the leadership of Parliament. That is the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. They should put their feet down. And you will see everything will turn. 1 year is still a long time. This thing of saying we are in for politics, for what? When even your performance is negligible.
38%.
Yeah, so why are you there rotating in the constituency? Why are you there? Come and demonstrate here.
Below average.
For me, I went to Parliament. I did my part. When I went back home, the issue was, in terms of my accountability, you are not very visible here. You don't appear in funerals. You don't we are not seeing you for weddings. I said, gentlemen, you have cried and cried that the leadership of Gulu municipality needs a very serious person. For 2 terms, you did not have it. Now, I decided to do exactly what you sent me to do. Now, what else are you cooking to justify that I should not go back to Parliament? You know? So I said, okay, if you think going around the death of people around the constituency is what brings a better MP, guys, let the people die. And those who can be around here because they want to be in all burials, it is a bad omen even in Acholi. To be appearing in all burials is a bad omen. Even dogs that go for every funeral are seen as bad omen.
They die.
And burials. You know? So I am proud that much as I did not get the number that was required to come back to Parliament, I am very, very happy in my heart. I went to that Parliament and demonstrated in 5 years that I can do a work which can take some of these people who stay in the villages 40 years to be in Parliament. You know, so for me, accountability in Parliament needs a new mechanism that those who have done forensic auditing should now come in. I think we need, the law should bring the aspect of forensic auditing more into the frameworks that will guarantee the protection of our funds. Because these days, even in institutions, when budgets are given in Parliament, the finance officers are located and money comes online. You just click money for this first quarter, this. You find you have 2 billion, right?
Yes.
Now the accounting officer will sit with other leadership of the institution. So, but in reality, what we wanted was 400 million. Okay, but we have
2 billion.
2 billion here. So what do we do? Of course, what we call the skinning of the animal.
Yeah.
In the local, setting.
They invent
They invent now how they account for the balance, and it fits. and mark towards the end of the budget, the end of budget here. Normally around June, all over the country, people are busy actually stealing government resources. I'm telling you,
Cooking budgets.
cooking budgets, so that money is not reverted back to the treasury. So at the end of the day, every year government loses trillions towards the end of the budget cycle, and it is accounted for. But if you go on forensic audits, you will get all the thieves in Uganda. That's why sometimes I said, if there could be a mood test, can I be a president of this country just for mood purposes for 6 months or 1 year? I'm telling you, Lozera will be very small.
For you.
We will build another new prison in Nakasongola that can take over 1 million inmates.
I don't know if Timothy will agree with you, but let me
Thank you.
let me bring in Ndugu Apollo. Apollo, let us now audit the component of service delivery, the critical role of Parliament in facilitating service delivery in terms of budget allocations, prioritizing the projects of the government, so on and so forth. If you were to interrogate that component, what would be your assessment?
Well, it is in this year when we learned that even MPs can sit and try to inflate budgets, to include kickbacks or money to steal. And all those budgets are built or created in the name of serving or taking services to the people. You remember how the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission reported that members of parliament sat in Hotel Africana and they were telling her, let's have 20% of this budget slotted into your budget and it will be our kickback. Remember it. So it tells you how the facilitators of service delivery are also pushing for their own interests. So literally they don't care about, they no longer care about service delivery. What they care about is their livelihoods to be catered for. They don't care. And I want to take it back to what I talked about of the highly commercialized politics that we operate in. When members of parliament now are looking for, potential or aspiring members of parliament are looking for more than 2 billion to pump into the next election so that they go back to parliament. You don't expect that when they come into office, they will care about services for their people. And that is why, like Honorable Komakech said here, that is why I can testify that we see members of parliament jostling and positioning themselves for foreign trips. They actually fight for foreign trips. They do everything to impress the people who are in authority to be on that list of people who will go on foreign trips so that they can earn as big per diems as possible, so that possibly to cover for the monies they spent during elections. So I think I have to agree with the Honorable Komakech that we need to have think tanks to look at how best the systems can be improved. We have to retrace the steps of the parliaments, the 5-6 parliaments which were strong, independent, and were pro-people. How did they do it? How best can we improve and have people in offices who prioritize service delivery beyond self. And to me, I think this can be done by, ideally this should be the civil society actors who should be driving that. But you know, the political environment we are operating in, civil society actors are also constrained. They are also limited by the authoritative hand of government. When you want to demonstrate to see positive change or to demand for positive change, like they said, you know automatically that you will go to Luzira. Even when you have information ready, you have evidence ready that these funds were stolen, I have evidence, you cannot present that evidence. There are no longer avenues to receive that evidence. So it is really disturbing. I pray that it happens. We get a force that can bring that sanity back, because Dr. here was talking about voters, bringing the wrong people in offices, but I reminded him about other factors. If the president comes to a rally to campaign for a candidate, then that means that his interest lies somewhere. He knows that this member of parliament, once he comes to the house, he will operate like a robot, because he is not so sure that he can win an election by himself or herself. So he or she owes the legitimacy somewhere, and he or she will always strive to impress the kingpin, the godfather who brought him or her into position. That is why now we are talking about the independence of parliament. Members of parliament, like someone submitted here, the Okule Parks would challenge the position of the executive, and they would stand by it. But that is no longer possible now. They cannot, and it is really bad. We hopefully, and when you talk about the quality of members of parliament, I am so convinced that at least this time round, come 2026, we will see many more not returning back. I have hope that this time round, because now you see individual merit has started, the principle of individual merit has started coming up. You see people now saying, even if this party has brought this one, no, for us, it happened in the Chisoro by-election, woman by-election. They said, no, your NRM, you're bringing this person, but for us, we want this one who is independent. And it happened. It is happening more frequently. So that is my hope, that when we have now people deciding, that means they are now identifying some qualities somewhere, and not listening to political parties, because Doctor was saying political parties should do, but political parties have failed to do that. They can no longer provide credible leaders now. Even those you would expect to have the muscle, to have the everything required to groom, they are not doing it. So my hope is now in the people, that the people are now becoming politically conscious. They are now starting to question to demand for the services directly. People are starting to evaluate the the quality of leaders, and that is my hope now. That's where I think we can have our hope that things may change once the civil society, the freedoms of the press have all been violated. Freedom of people to demonstrate and protest and express themselves has been curtailed. Then we can only wait for elections now. Our hope can be in elections to bring good leaders.
Thank you, Apro, for your perspective. Doctor, speaking of elections, even as we conclude the program, the 2026 electoral cycle is impending. Is there hope for the country that, considering the performance of Parliament in this year ending 2024, that we could have better fortunes for the next Parliament to come?
Yeah, definitely. We have fortune out there, but only if we start to do certain things differently. I particularly want, in my concluding thoughts, to direct my mind to two categories of thoughts. One is that, like our friend Timothy says, and we agree with him largely because he sits in Parliament and he watches over Parliament. Is there work going on in Parliament? Yes, there is something going on in Parliament. The question is, what is going on and of what quality? But I think to be able to answer that question correctly, we need to put it in context. I just want to go briefly to the issue of governance and the entire framework. I love, there is a phrase the Honorable Mao likes to use, which I have appreciated the philosophy in it. He says there is no way a fish can start to rot from any other part other than
The head.
the head. That statement means a lot, especially in our context in Uganda. We have taken on Parliament, we have appreciated it, we have punched it in some instances, but this Parliament is not operating in isolation. This Parliament is part of a body politic. I am so far convinced that we need to revisit, especially the epistemology of democracy and democracy today. Because what we have is a package which was handed over. And I don't want to sound lamentist. I'm actually no colonial apologist. I am a realist, and I'm very thorough about this. I'm keen and interested in seeing that this citizen I'm talking about is empowered more. There are studies that have shown. I was part of a study, a democratic study on electoral democracy in Indonesia. Indonesia, by the way, is one of the most populous nations of the world. So that sample we used was a very large sample, millions of people. One of the key things that came out of that study was that, by the way, it is possible for the electorate to improve on who they elect. And all that was the central question. And we asked a number of additional questions. One of the key findings was that, by the way, when voters have enough information about a candidate, they get more rational on who they are electing. Now, we have a real paradox amidst us. One, we have a population that is largely youth. We have a population that is being accused of having very short memory, very short span of concentration, and being hyper. But psychologists will tell you that is the youth. That is what a youth should be. So the onus is upon those of us out of that category, we now who are tending towards senior citizenship, to ensure that if there are any philosophies or values that should be handed down to these young people, we should capture the moment and do it. We should be doing it because there are now two spaces that we should be present with the content that can save this country, or with the conversation that can save this country. One is the digital presence, and the other is the non-digital. So the question is, are we operational in those two forums? That is food for thought. The other one is that our colleague has kept arguing that other than the question of the voters not being aligned with the thoughts on who a good leader is and who not a good leader is, because of the questions of finances in elections. But I don't want to agree that there is anything like as expensive or cheap elections. All elections, all democracy is expensive. It comes at a cost. Because even the cost of decision, which requires you to have high information about somebody, is a cost. So you must sacrifice to get that information. I told you, I gave you the allegory of boys going to Kampala for a couple of years with a Kavera, and then they come back with some fake briefcase with a bit of English, and now they are saying, we called them to try and come and help us. Help us over what? You have a school headmaster who has been at a school for 20 years. He has passed 3 or 4 of your daughters through that primary school to secondary to university. That is an eligible leader. How can now somebody come back from Arua Park here and you're now saying, we have called you back? The point I'm trying to make, let us scrutinize these people more. And then 2, this thing called the NRM is not helping us. This thing is a deep fake. This is the thing which is distorting the environment. Why? Right now, I will go through this social media. I am appalled, by the way. I'm scared at how many what do you call them, posters? Posts. Self-styled leaders. I mean, let me tell you, it's not that Leandro is my friend. Leandro, I saw this guy build his political muscle from one trouser to basic sentences of English to deep philosophy of democracy that he's speaking today. I saw this. There are people like this amidst us. How can we just surrender? I think we have surrendered too soon. How can we just accept that now this thing called the movement is undefeatable and everybody, it has become like a cult? And I think I want to challenge my friends in the academia. We need to study this thing. Because how is it that everybody now just wakes up, an adult of 18 years who has gone to college, cannot even sit to question and ask? Because in 38 years, what have been the deliverables? There are reports. This is not me. There is Twaweza. They have been giving us literacy and numeracy. P6, P7. A boy in P6 cannot pass a math test of P3. Is that quality in education? COVID came. It caught us pan down. People were charging for, just before I see a patient, 15 million. And some doctor sits somewhere and you cannot say nothing about it. I saw some soldier in a bus park that is shouting, you reduce prices. Is that how capitalism works? We have embraced capitalism. We are living with it. You know, I've said this before. If the English say, if you make your bed, you sleep on it. So we have an animal that we don't understand. Do we need a conversation as a people? Yes, we do. Because with retrospect, we need to ask ourselves, where are the baby steps? Because there are some benchmarks they talk about. If they say Uganda, South Korea were at par in 1962, if we are saying the 6th Parliament had people who stood out and spoke to power.
What happened?
And would go back home and come back. We are saying we have drawn a framework that there is something called civic space which needs to be defended. What more should we say to these young people? I really think at the end of the day, life is a collective sum. It is both individual and it is public. We are all soldiers of this democracy. When you are called on to duty and you cannot face up to it, then we are all in a conundrum. Yes.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your perspective on the program with us. I must appreciate you, my panelists, Mr. Chemonges, Dr. Tolit, Honorable Komakech, and Mr. Apollo Tusimi, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament, and for your very patriotic reflections to the citizenry out there. Our esteemed viewers, once again, we appreciate you for watching, and many thanks for your time. Many thanks indeed to the production department who have kept us live on air. Please, our dear viewers, engage us on our social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, where you can watch and subscribe to this program. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.